The Westies was the name given by the Irish media to a criminal gang based in Blanchardstown, West Dublin, in Ireland. They controlled the heroin trade in West Dublin in the late 90s and early 2000s, and were known for their extreme violence against drug addicts and rival drug dealers. The gang, who were also involved in armed robberies and extortion, imploded after the murders of all of its leaders. Welcome back to Crime Chronicles. Stay tuned as we look at an Irish gang with an outsized reputation that disappeared just as quickly as it emerged. In August of 2003, revenge was in the air after the murder of a West Dublin gang member in a crowded pub. For a hard man, Bernard Verb Sugg wasn't a drinker. He was sipping soda water when two gunmen, dressed in black with balaclavas, burst into the Brookwood Inn in West Dublin. It had all the hallmarks of a professional hit. They knew exactly where to go and who their target was. Sugg and the other members of the Westies gang always sat in the same spot, just to the left, inside the main door. Sunday nights were always busy at the Brookwood Inn. There was pandemonium as screaming customers fled for cover as soon as the gunmen walked in. But the gunmen were only interested in Bernard, brother of senior Westie Stephen Sugg. 9 shots were fired and 2 hit him in the chest. He crawled along the floor in an attempt to escape, but his wounds would prove fatal and he died in hospital an hour later. About 150 mourners attended his funeral, and there was plenty of talk about revenge among the crowd. "It's going to be like World War III around here," said one excited teenager. Some of the kids on the Cardiff estate, where Sugg lived and died, talk of little but the Westies and rival gangs. Hanging around the murder scene, watching police and forensic experts come and go, they recount alleged gang activities as if it were a Hollywood movie. A Westie was badly hurt in a big shootout with the guards in Cavan a few months ago, but he got away and a vet removed the bullets, a 12-year-old says. A 16-year-old tells of lorry loads of cigarettes and designer goods hijacked by the Westies at gunpoint. And then there was the time the Westies stole rare birds from a County Meath zoo. Cocky the cockatoo was later found in Kinahans, County Westmeath, imitating the noises of a local man smoking outside his house. The Westies, named after the Irish-American gang that terrorized Hell's Kitchen, New York in the 70s and 80s, sprang up in West Dublin in the late 90s. They were all in their 20s and early 30s, and as teenagers, they were car thieves along the M50, which circles Dublin and is the busiest motorway in Ireland. It is believed they were responsible for the drugs-linked murder of Paul Ryan from Raheny in Dublin in April of 2003. He was found in a farmer's field, shot in the head, his hands tied behind his back. The Westies were mainly active in Dublin, but sometimes operated up to 50 kilometres from the city. Their main business is the supply of heroin and other drugs in West and North Dublin. They are known for their casual brutality, and police sources at the time said they are not the smartest on the block. Other gangs are uneasy about the unpredictable, vicious nature of the Westies' violence. Drug users who owe the gang money are often targeted, and they have slashed their victims with razor knives, with one man requiring 80 stitches to his face. Cigarettes were stubbed out on the breasts of a mother who couldn't pay for her heroin. A man in a wheelchair who owed money was beaten up. A police source says Sugg was a typical Westie, violent, monosyllabic, thick, and full of himself. He was a well-known bully, even ensuring there was no choice in the Brookwood Inn over television channels. It was tuned into his favourite channel, MTV, and nobody was allowed to change it. Like many Westies, he was into bodybuilding and abused steroids. Tensions were high between Sugg and a North Dublin gang that was involved in a turf war with the Westies. They reached breaking point when Sugg, who also worked as a doorman in the Brookwood Inn, refused entry to rival gang members twice in the week before his murder. This gang, led by former Westie associates the Kinahans and another gang, became the leading suspects in the murder investigation. But they weren't the only ones. Sugg had so many enemies, and initially, the police were not hopeful the murder investigation would lead to convictions. In the early 2000s, even on a bright sunny day, the Cardiff estate was a depressing place. There was a 2-story shopping centre, though that's something of a misnomer because so many units were closed. There was a newsagent, a chippy, and a chemist, but the post office was the busiest place, as people queue to collect their welfare benefits. Next door to the shopping centre is the Brookwood Inn. A local man says he stopped drinking in the pub because the Westies were always there. He said there would be a big crowd of them. They were very intimidating. The language out of them was terrible. I wasn't comfortable. I just started buying a few cans from the off-licence and sitting at home instead. That way, there's no chance of trouble. Ordinary people stay well clear of the Westies, said another man. If you cross them over the smallest thing, you end up in A&E. Sugg lived around the corner from the pub in an ordinary house. Other gang members live in more comfortable, but generally not luxurious surroundings. Residents say some shops were forced to pay the Westies €200 a week protection money. The Criminal Assets Bureau ordered one gang member, who has since fled the country, to pay €150,000. He was assessed for the tax proceeds of his criminal activity for 9 months in 1998 and 1999. He had spent the first 3 months in jail. It's not just prison the Westies have to contend with. The murder wasn't the first act of violence directed against the gang, as Sugg had been shot in the stomach the previous year. Once senior members of the gang started being targeted, some would decamp to Spain, thinking distance would offer protection. The remaining Westies sought to arm themselves and stole a substantial cache of weapons from a registered firearms dealer in Balbriggan, County Dublin, while they held him and his family hostage. After a shootout with police in Virginia, County Cavan a week later, 21 weapons, including handguns, rifles, and sawn-off shotguns, and more than 1,000 rounds of ammunition would be recovered. Even before Sugg's death, the Westies were increasingly seen as a dwindling force due to police activities and hostility from rival gangs. Police sources said the Westies only had about 24 hardcore members around the time Suggs was murdered. They were big fish in West Dublin, but overall they weren't that huge, and apart from their families, there was no support for them in their own areas. The community didn't turn out for Sugg's funeral. "I'll shed no tears over him," says one man after Sugg's murder. "What goes around comes around." Another man, just out of prison, said Sugg was a thug and a coward. There are 3 or 4 young ones in jail because of him. He got them to do his dirty work. But for one 16-year-old, Sugg was a sound bloke. He didn't deserve to go like that. He was all right. He was good for a laugh. He was taking the piss out of me just before he was killed, he said. The remaining Westies leadership relocated to Alicante in Spain shortly after Bernard's murder. But they didn't last long before the Grim Reaper, in the shape of rival gang assassins, caught up with them. Shane Coates and Stephen Suggs would go missing in 2004, and their bodies would be found buried under concrete in a warehouse near Alicante in 2006. Both had been shot in the head. They had been going for barely 5 years, rapidly gaining notoriety for their fear-based, ultra-violent activities. But just like that, with a few well-placed bullets, the Westies were no more. Thank you for joining us today on Crime Chronicles. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share the channel with your friends.